And we got a special guest in the house, my buddy Clint, the man, the myth, the legend. So we're gonna have him probably talk a little bit later in the meeting, because he's been in the alternative space. But yeah, so today we're going to talk about that a lot of counties in various states, especially out west, have been cracking down on homesteaders within the last couple of years. And so I want to play some videos for you guys about the subjects that she's talking about in her videos. And so let's play them for you guys.
I'm not hearing any sound.
Ah, shoot. Okay. Maybe if I take out my headphones.
Wait, that's TikTok. You sure she's not Chinese?
Oh, you know what? Let me play it off my Telegram. I bet the Telegram will work better. How about now?
Now she's paused. I still hear nothing.
All right, that's fine. So I'll basically just give you guys a brief synopsis then. This lady in the video, she is in Colorado. She's in probably the biggest farming town that Colorado has. It produces 80% of Colorado's meat and dairy products. And so in this video, she's talking about how local counties, local municipalities, and she's exaggerating this video a lot. But basically in this video, it's probably to grab some attention, but she's saying that counties are seizing people's properties, and then they're using the properties to build public utilities like 5G towers, public easements like trails and stuff like that. And guys, she's really exaggerating. Before they even do that, they have to first approach you before they do it, and then they'll often offer you fair market value for the property. So they'll offer to buy it from you, and there is a law in place where they do have to offer you fair market value. And if you don't own the land in a trust, then you're not really protected in this scenario, and you're basically going to have to accept the money. But in this video, she's talking about how they're just seizing people's properties and she's trying to scare them. And then in her next video, she talks about that, and she might be selling a course or something about this stuff, but she's saying that if you get a land patent or get an allodial title on the land, then it protects you and the state can't mess with you. And I forgot to mention, in the first part of the video too, she says that, the counties, they're basically denying people permits for various stuff they do on the homestead, right? But I'm going to get into how we can get around even needing to get a permit from the local municipality, right? And we're going to be covering that, how to do that. But really, she's looking at this whole thing backwards in like 3 different ways. But that's too bad you guys can't hear this video.
Well, I mean, it's apropos to say that the reason that the state can come in to the land is because the state is the only one that can hold allodial title. It's the highest title. You're never going to be equal to your tyrant. I'm sorry, your king isn't. You can't be the king. You can't be as high as the sovereign. You're never going to get a allodial title, but you can get a perfect title. You can get a fee simple type of title. You can get all kinds of things, but you're never going to have a allodial title. That's reserved for the king.
Yeah. Absolutely. And a lot of these woo-woo gurus out there, they talk about how the Queen of England owns it, stuff like that. That's woo-woo, and there's no evidence of that. Really, there's no need for that, because the United States, like you said, that's a company, right? Think of it like the West Indies Company. And if you really want to get deep into it, it's a private membership association. But anyway, so yeah, he has a good point. And so obviously she's exaggerating in her videos, and she brings up some things that we need to be cognizant of. And so as a society, we need to learn how to exercise and convey our property rights. in her video, she was claiming that the government is taking people's property rights, but it's because people don't know their property rights to begin with, or even how to establish them in the first place. And so she's making it sound like the government can come in, take your land, and then they can build a public utility like a 5G tower or something, right? Or whether it's an easement like a trail or a public highway or a road they want to build, they can do that. But like I said, they must offer you fair market value for the property. That's law. Now, if I own the land in a trust, I can tell the county I don't want to sell the land for fair market value. And then a lot of times they'll come back and ask for more than fair market value, and I can still say no. Because trust law, when we use a trust, we're divesting our property rights. And so now we're involving multiple people. And so for them to go in and try to trample on multiple people's property would be controversial, right? So they're not going to do that. And so they're really going to just try to purchase it from you. And when you have it in trust, it's outside of your straw man. And we're going to be talking about that, I'm sure, a little bit with Clint. He's an expert on the straw man. So I just want to tell you guys that trust law, it supersedes legislative law. And a lot of these land use codes that she mentions in her videos, the land use codes are legislative law. And yes, they have passed a lot of land use codes in the legislative law in the last couple of years, ever since the whole scamdemic started, really. But just know that you guys have property rights, and we just got to learn this. And so the county, the state, they can pass all these laws they want, but as long as I know my property rights and exercise them properly, my property rights can't be taken from me like they're trying to convince people.
Well, let me give you an example, and this is an example that not a lot of people heard about, but I thought was freaking hilarious. Because in California, Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he was governor, he started seizing a lot of lands, a lot of public lands. They were closing public lands, and they wanted to close Will Rogers State Beach, which is a huge beach, between Santa Monica. It's a vastly popular beach. But when he was doing it to everything else. And when he tried to do it to Will Rogers, now, Will Rogers being a very famous name, okay? The Rogers family came out and said, that land is in a trust. You have a very specific duty to uphold and keep that open to the public on behalf of Will Rogers, his request in that trust. Okay, and Arnold Schwarzenegger had to back the hell off and couldn't do a damn thing, and that beach is open today, and it's still a public beach. They have to run it, even though they say it costs them money. The whole thing, I mean, the concept of this trust is way more powerful than I don't think anybody can really imagine the power behind it if you practice the power yourself. That's just it,
Right.
It's kind of like a Christian. You're not really powerful unless you're really playing the part, right? You are the law. So it's the trust, when exercised, can knock down the frickin' governor, the governator of a state. It's pretty damn powerful, right? It's a family trust. So powerful.
Absolutely. Because, a trust law, it goes back a long time, and really it was perfected in Old England. And nothing's changed, and nothing will change about trust law, because this is what the elites use for themselves, right? But little do people know, we all have the same tool at our fingertips. It's just we haven't been taught this. And so in this lady's video, she's thinking like how a slave thinks, right? Because we don't know our property rights. And I don't mean to rip on this lady. I talked to her a little bit. She seems nice. And they're literally vacating their land just because they believe something that some asshole in the county tells them.
One more thing just to say about that, because am I coming through okay? I didn't really get a chance to sound check.
Yeah, audio's good.
I was reading this document, and it's called Trust. It's called Trusts, Weapons of Mass Injustice. Okay, so this is a critique on how trusts allow organized crime, essentially. And I tell you that while that sounds like a bad thing, it gives you an idea of the power behind this, right? If you
Sure.
take, say, a mobster, how did they always get the mobsters? Tax evasion, because they couldn't bust them for their speakeasies. They couldn't bust them for this. They couldn't bust them for that. They had to go after taxes because so they had to get the bookie, right? They had to get this guy right here. He had to get him and get his books, and then they had some evidence that they were doing public things. Well, so just imagine what you could do without going to the dark side. That's my point. But this is what this paper said. It says, secondly, trusts go beyond secrecy by shielding assets from the rest of society. They do this by placing assets into ownerless limbo. There you go. Rockefeller, own nothing, control everything. Where the assets in this ownerless limbo, assets have legally been given away but not yet received by a real warm-blooded person.
Yep.
Thus unreachable even by legitimate personal creditors of the parties to the trust, or tax authorities, or crime-fighting agencies. That just listed all the agencies that you're worried about. Your creditors can't come and say, I want that property, because now it's a group property, right? It's a PMA. It's not just one single thing that you can go after and put a lien on. Trust asset protection can be stronger than the usual limited liability available to shareholders or of incorporated companies, and this is available not just for vulnerable persons, but for anyone, especially wealthy people accumulating wealth through generations, worsening inequality. So here's a guy whining about people acting the way they should act, the way the whole country and all these nations, everything was set up in the first place since the Babylonian times.
Yes.
Here's a guy whining about it, probably because, most people who aren't successful, that's what they do, right? So, on top of this all, tax havens are engaged in a race to the bottom to offer ever more devious and illegitimate forms of trust law, allowing multiple subterfuges to defeat the laws of other jurisdictions. Now, it goes on and it talks about crime and it talks about how people get away with things, and it's true. Mm-hmm. And it's so horrible to think of the things that the bar and the priests and the Jesuits and the Masons get away with, right? It's horrible to think about that. So my opinion is that all crimes happen in the private.
Yes.
And all justice really happens in the private.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes to get justice, perhaps you might have to commit a crime, right? I mean, let's face it. When people were trespassing on someone's land and they got shot in the old days, what was that? Was it illegal? No, it was private land.
Yep.
So if I'm looking at this and I'm looking at it correctly, the only way that good people, we, can actually fight these people is in the private. If we do what they do, get their protections, the only way you're going to stop these people is to go private yourself. Again, what's your secret identity? What's your superhero identity? It's not the public person. So, I mean, that might sound a little extreme, but I want you to think, I mean, the amount of crime, the amount of stuff that happens because of this misuse of this trust concept needs to be counterbalanced by the rest of us. We need to step in and start saying, okay, we need to become private investigators. We need to do so, because we can't do it within the public, because the public protects the private.
Absolutely.
So what are you supposed to do if you're stuck in the public and all of its laws? How do you fight the private? You don't, because you're a prisoner of them. So, I mean, I just wanted to get that out, because this is the best way, I think, to really understand the power of trust, is to think about all the criminals and all the bad people that use them, and then think about what you can do On the, like I said, on the light side, use the use the force correctly, right? So that's just my 2 cents on the subject.
Yeah, beautifully said, Clint. And let's see. So yeah, so we're talking about homesteads here, and we're talking about living in the private and the public, and so let's get into that. And so when it comes to homesteads, and so this lady, she mentions how the counties, they're turning people down for permits for use of land like farming and stuff like that, and that's real. But what can we do about that if that happens to you? And so we're getting to the point where the USDA and similar bodies are proxies of the UN to further establish their various agendas on stifling our food supply and natural resources. So it's at the point now where between them and dealing with the counties, it's time to just stop playing their rigged game, like Clint says. We can go down the road of litigation, but that's a long-winded process and it's costly and it's not always going to work out, right? So now there is a trend going on about PMAs the last couple of years. I'm surprised this even blew up. I've been using it for a long time, ever since I was 20 years old. But I'm happy that it's starting to get some attention because, of course, with the PMA, we don't have to play that rigged game of regulation. And I cover that topic enough where we don't have to go too far into PMAs. But really, more of us need to start using PMAs to hedge the UN's agenda. And it's funny that we're at this point because we're talking about using PMAs to counteract the UN and the Masons and all these kind of groups who are PMAs. So you can see what's being used for evil deeds can also be used for good. And so a sort of reversal, like a boomerang, is used in a PMA. And so it's just like how in the Matrix, Neo had to absorb Agent Smith to beat him. So if every neighborhood, let's say, had a PMA, imagine that. That's, I think, where things are going. I think that's the future. Nico that's in here, she had a brilliant idea recently where her parents are in a retirement home and they're charging these guys way too much. They're giving them horrible food. And she had the brilliant idea, well, why don't we start a retirement home PMA, right? That's not open to the public, where we can do things in the private. And so useful things we can do. If I'm a homesteader in a more rural setting, that's ideal, right? And so really you're fine with the PMA holding the land in a trust in that situation and conducting the homesteading under a PMA when it comes to the sales and stuff like that. But if I'm in a more suburban area, I can do those things too, but I'd also consider going to get together with my neighbors and we all pull in our resources. And I would go about it like this. I would consider building an indoor garden, and a good example of this is like the cannabis industry. A lot of these cannabis guys, they start out growing cannabis in their basements in a kind of guerrilla format. I think that's where things are going. We're going to have to do something like that when it comes to our food. And so really these cannabis guys, they perfected the hydroponic growing system for plants. And we can do that pretty much for whatever plant we want. And so I was working with a cannabis company last year who had a huge warehouse facility, but in the back, they're also growing food. And so these guys were smart and they had the system called aquaculture. And it's a more advanced version of hydroponic farming. It's basically, it involves a self-feeding system that's regenerative. And so it's always self-generating. And so I'm mentioning growing food indoors because between, the air surveillance technology that even small counties use, the chemicals in the air, the geoengineering, and the potential for dirty bombs in the future, because they're always trying to stoke the war with countries like Russia or China even. That's what they really want. They're trying to program us, like that balloon thing, that's them trying to program us to get ready for this war that they're wanting to pull off. I'm not sure if they will be able to pull it off, but I'm just saying that's, that stuff like that balloon in Montana, it's not what people think. It's pre-programming. And so now, and another thing too is why we want to grow indoors potentially is jab shedding. I'm honestly concerned going in the store now, being around all these people who probably got jabbed, and I'm breathing the same air that they're shedding in. And so that's something we want to consider too. And another thing too is, let's say, shit hits the fan. Well, if you have a big homestead that's, kind of more open, not in a rural setting, but even in a rural setting, if shit hits the fan, you're going to be the number one target for theft. And so an indoor operation is going to be the ultimate setup, I think, for the future. And we can get really sophisticated. We can build underground grows. We can use recessed lighting that's optimal. And with that kind of system, we don't even have to be completely dependent on grow lights. And so that's just for plants, right? Now, another thing too is, outside I could have my cattle or whatever, but in this kind of indoor facility that I'm talking about, we could have bison. And bison, they don't need to move really that much as other form of livestock. And the bison meat, honestly, is the tastiest and the most nutrient dense anyways. So now if you're here, I mentioned trusts quite a bit. And they really are my preferred method of conveying property rights, kind of why the reasons we went through earlier. And so lately on my videos about using trust for property, I'm getting comments all over the place on how trusts are inferior to things like land patents or allodial titles. So I'm going to unpack those two things, the land patents and the allodial titles. And those are something that's being pushed by these supposed sovereign groups, and it's been going on for decades, right? And so I want to get into land patents first. But before I unpack it, I want Clint to kind of come in because he's done a lot of research on these things. If you have anything to add to that, Clint.
Well, I mean, for what you were talking about earlier, for instance, she says they're not giving permits or they're not giving licenses, right? Well, what is a permit, right? You got to ask yourself, why would I need a permit to grow food in the first place? That would imply that growing food is somehow illegal. Why do I need a license or permission to get married? And the answer is you don't, but your person does. You see, because when two persons get married, it's a corporation. When two people have a spiritual union, it's love. But when two persons now you're joining two fictions that don't belong to you in the first place. You got to get permission from the state, and they become one person in law, and it becomes what's called a family corporation under the family car doctrine and all these different doctrines, and your children are your agents, are not actually your children, and it's a whole mess. The family and corporation are pretty much the same word. Government considers us our one big happy family, basically, of persons. So when you're talking about all of these laws, you got to ask, who or what do they apply? And in all cases, of course, they apply to the person, right? Now, if I'm acting in private, am I acting as a U.S. person? No. Do I need permission as a private whatever you want to call yourself to grow food? Why would I need permission? It's not against the law. It's part of nature, right? So a lot of these things, these silly rules, for instance, not being able to feed the homeless, well, okay, get the homeless to form a private association, and then you can feed them perfectly lawfully, not legally, lawfully, right? So there's a lot of consideration, and I think the hardest part for all of us, including myself, is transitioning ourselves, our actions, into the private mode. Like, if you're of the public mindset, which most of us are, we're publicly schooled, publicly trained, publicly entertained, right? Entertainment, to enter and tain, or the mind, mentis, entertain, which is hold in Latin. It's enter and hold the mind. So we're conditioned, we're indoctrinated to do everything publicly, to no secrets, no personal anything. Everything is up for public consumption. Why would you ever wish to do that? I understand. We're all in the same boat. We've all been. So how do we start thinking privately? And this is what you have to start thinking about. You have to start thinking that in every situation, am I acting in a vessel, in a commercial vessel, and is that vessel my own? In other words, if I want to play Monopoly, am I using one of the pieces on the game? Because I can't play Monopoly as a man. I have to play as a piece. I have to like go into the game. I can't go into the Matrix unless I choose, I have this avatar, because otherwise I wouldn't exist. So when I go and play Monopoly, do I play with a piece that belongs to the bank? Because at the end, everything's folded up and goes to the bank. Or do I put my own representation of myself, my own sort of persona, if you will? And I have seen documents that call trusts either a person or an entity loosely.
Yeah.
So if I put my own entity and play the game, and then when the board closes, I take that entity with me, and there's no trace of that entity on the board, well, how are they going to, yeah, I trespassed on your property. Who are you gonna go after? Because, I don't belong to that realm, so I wasn't trespassing, I was sojourning. Right? I mean, everything changes. The language changes. Everything changes to the point where you're now acting as yourself, or you're using a company, as we say, an LLC, to do businesses. But that company is the one doing business. All you are is a signatory to it. And when you're an employee, and you get the company credit card, are you responsible for it? No, but you're given signing rights. Your principal, your hirer, your employer is responsible for it, not you.
Yeah.
But that doesn't take away the right that they have bestowed upon you through this trust relationship, if you will, right? To use to be a signatory and use it for business purposes. So the point is, how do you be in the world and not of it? I've heard a lot of people use that concept from the Bible, and it's a very important concept. Well, if everything you do in the public stays in the public, and you remain private, your name's not on anything you do there, well, then you've now separated yourself. Now you get your land and you live a private life on that land, no matter what your title says.
Yeah.
And you grow your food. And if they come in and say, do you know what here's the thing. When we did a protest at the airport, right? It was National Opt-out Day, so everybody went to the airports. I was handing out flyers and we did our own special thing where it was "We Are Change" in here in Utah, and all the police officers and all the guys in suits and everything, they picked on me for some reason, which was a mistake. we got the head of the police, right? The airport police, who's a complete moron. Who he says two things. I says, well, this, you're handing out advertising. Well, advertisement in legal means something else entirely. But
Right.
I was able to show that we're not selling anything, we're just providing information. There's nothing illegal or needing a permit for. You need a permission to advertise. Why? Why do I need permission to advertise? Well, there's a reason. And he said what the reason was, which was the funniest thing I think I ever heard in my life. First, he said, free speech is not absolute. You need a permit for free speech. I got him on camera saying that. I was pretty astounded. And then the next thing he says is, well, I was like, well, why would I go and get a permit if the permit then puts me under your control? You want me to get a permit so you can control my actions. If without the permit, from what you're saying, you have no power. This is why we're standing here talking and deliberating, because you have no power over me right now. Because you know I'm not advertising. I'm handing out information. None of you, of all these federal, spooks, and all of you in uniform, none of you have approached me to put handcuffs on me or tell me I need to leave. You know I'm not doing anything wrong. You want me to get a permit so that I now agree to your rules, and then you can tell me to leave. But until I get that permit, they couldn't do anything to me. So So he says, yes, you must get a permit so that we can tell you exactly what you can and can't do. Why do they want you to get a permit to get married? Why do they want you to get a permit for growing food? So they can tell you exactly what to do. Because they want to control the person. If they control the person, they control you because you're in bond and surety to it. Simple as that. You're not getting a permit. Your person is getting a permit.
Right.
And you don't own it.
Yep.
So there's absolutely no reason to get permission for anything. You're not asking permission to form a PMA.
Right.
Why would you ask permission to do something privately?
Well, it's funny too, because even if I try to register a PMA, there's no way I could. There's nowhere to register it at.
Right.
And so a lot
It's
of
like
people ask me
registering
that.
a secret society. What's
Right.
kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah. Are the Masons registered anywhere? No. Is the World Economic Forum registered anywhere? Because that's a PMA. No. And so, guys, we kind of have to start looking at things differently, like what we're describing, operating in the private. And and Clint mentioned the LLC, and we do use the LLC in the safe haven system to operate business, but our person doesn't own the LLC. Your all caps name doesn't own the LLC. Your straw man doesn't own it. It's the PMA that's the owner of the LLC. And because we write it up as a trust, now we're using trust law on top of that. And so, beautifully said. And so, I try to, because it's kind of funny. I've been blowing up on TikTok lately because I started calling out these state nationals for the fraud that they are. And a lot of them get triggered. David Lester Strait actually just contacted me on Telegram. I had to block the guy because I don't really want him snooping on my life, honestly.
Well, you don't want to give them any more information than they have, because then they're going to even appear even more legitimate when they tell you, "Oh, I know this too."
Right.
Yeah, these guys are complete frauds. They're when I started talking about this maybe a year ago, I was very afraid to even mention it because I knew people would start, using it incorrectly. They're just dying to get some new angle
Right.
to sell you their paperwork or their method or their
Yeah.
pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that everybody knows the rainbow doesn't actually exist, right? There's no
Right.
end to the rainbow because it's an illusion. There's
Yeah.
no pot of gold. There's nothing to collect. There's no passing go and collecting 200. That's not how it works. They didn't set it up that way. It's not a treasure hunt.
Yeah.
No, you're a prisoner of frickin' war. They don't set it up that as if you get some reward, right? Your rewards are spiritual, if anything. So
Yeah.
if you're going to want to collect on those rewards, well, then you're not going to do it in the public. You can't. It's illegal to be Christian. To follow Christ. It's illegal to, right? Churches are illegal, essentially. They have to be incorporated and put under man's law. You can't be Christian in the public. It's impossible.
Exactly right. And so I want to get into now the land patents and allodial titles, because I have all these people asking me about it. I have all these haters in my comments saying that I'm doing it all wrong. I'm supposed to do these things instead. And this is what homesteaders should do and what everyone else should do. This is the ultimate, way to get around the government when it comes to land. And so let's talk about what a land patent is. It was used as evidence, right? And so for title or interest in real property in the early days of America. And land patents were usually granted by a central, federal, or state government to an individual. But since then, these tracts of land have been separated. They've been platted, they've been carved up, and they've been conveyed through time by deeds instead. So the deeds replace these land patents. And so there's a movement today by some of these so-called clever cheats who argue that even if you own title to a parcel of land today, by way of a valid warranty deed or title deed, that someone who has a land patent for it has superior title. But that's not true. Land patents interest can only be conveyed same as deeds. And so land patents do not last forever, as some of these guys argue by citing random case law from like 200 years ago. And a lot of them use the same case law from the 1800s. and it doesn't hold up. If you have no need to learn about land patents unless you like to study US history or something, or you're a researcher for a title company tracing ownership of land back to the US colonies, right? But that's not really any of our situations. And so a landowner misrepresents property. If a landowner misrepresents property at a sheriff's sale by informing potential bidders that a land patent prevents the sale, he arguably has purposely defrauded all of those present at the auction. Because a lot of these sovereign types, they go into foreclosure because they refuse to pay their property tax, and then they try to say that I don't have to pay my property tax because it's in a land patent. And so when the property gets auctioned off by the county because they got foreclosed on, these sovereign people say that they're trying to get people away from buying the property at auction. So they're lying, saying, hey, this property is worth nothing because it's in a land patent. So really, if they go in an auction and do this, this is a crime. And this happens a lot. And so he's arguably defrauded all of those present at the auction. And so now it is possible that a landowner, even attempting to file a declaration of land patent, could be charged with attempted fraud. That's mail fraud. After the declaration of land patent has standing to file an action against the filer of the declaration from disparagement of his property or slander or of title, an action may be brought against anyone who falsely and maliciously defames the property of another, and so causing him some damage, right? Some property damage. And so the nature of the action for slander of title is legally considered peculiar, being based upon a defamatory attack upon property. And so these three elements are, necessary for the maintenance of such a suit. And so, really, you're going to go down this rabbit hole that's going to lead you to getting charged with fraud.
Ironically, something else I've been reading and have seen repeated times is that the trust is the closest thing to any kind of, if the word sovereignty is used, it will be in trust law. What I want you to understand first is, and if you come across someone who says that you can be sovereign, all right, this is the first instance where this guy does not know what the hell he's talking about. Now, I can refer you to all kinds of things, but the best thing to refer you to is simply the maxims of law, right? Maxims of law are everything. They're the foundation. They're what a judge looks at before he makes a judgment, right? Depending on jurisdiction. And the great thing about the maxims of law is that all the good ones, the ones that protect the man from this beast system, are from the Bible, most of them. Then you get into contract law, right? Contract law takes you out of the realm of nature and puts you into the realm of the contract, where the maxim says the contract makes the law. So citizenship is a contractual obligation to the state. Okay, so you're under contract. You didn't sign a contract. It's implied because you're using the person, you're using all the benefits, therefore you're technically bound by all the laws that go behind it. So what does the maxim of law say about sovereignty? Well, only the king or the god. Now, God is a generic term. It can mean anything from mayor to president to prime minister to Jehovah it's a generic term. They used to, when they went to court, if you read the old court documents, I don't know if you ever come across this. I love the old court documents because they were a time when things were still settling into this nation state model.
Yeah.
But if you look at the old documents, the correct terminology then was that the plaintiff or the defendant kneeled or prayed to the God of the court. That is how they wrote it, because even in England, the Queen had a mandate not too long ago that you're to call judges Lord. Right? Why? Because they're gods. I mean, look up the term God. It's a magistrate. It's anybody that's in power over you, that you allow to have power over you. What do you think the first commandment means? Have no false gods. That is all of these people who claim power over you. I'm sorry to tell you, it's not Zeus. It's not, no, it's the president. It's all these false gods.
Yeah.
Because that's what God means. And that's how it's defined in the concordances, too. So, when you're talking about sovereignty, what is the maxim of law? And this killed it for me. I never will ever think myself or anybody else as a sovereign except for a king who declares that. And that is simply this. A sovereign, to be a sovereign, you have to rule over other people.
Yeah.
What the hell is a king without subjects? What is a sovereign without people to be sovereign over, or land or anything else? You're not sovereign, folks. You are not sovereign. Now, the state, which is another word for people and state are the same word. We, the states, yeah, those are semi-sovereign entities, and that's what we're actually kind of going back into is the state constitution, the state law, the private side. That is to be part of the people, part of the state. But don't ever think that you are the people, because people is plural. Person, the plural of person is persons. Persons aren't people. The people is the state. The state is represented, so we, the people, are actually the Senate, because that's who we put up to it. So any idea that you have, anyone that tells you you're sovereign, there is only one, you should have only one sovereign, and that is God on high. That is your sovereign. That is where your law comes from. Everything else is man-made. All sovereignties, besides Jehovah, YHVH in the Bible, is false. It's artificial. It's a false god. That's what all these people are. And that amazed me when I discovered that, when I looked at the old records and they used the word God like it was a normal term, like we should, and that they pray instead of plea. They pray to the God of the court. So the sovereignty thing, that's how you instantly recognize a fraud.
Yep.
So let's start off with that foundation. Now, can a non-sovereign entity hold a sovereignty or a allodial title over land? No, because the other maxim of law says you, the common people, can never have the power of the sovereign. You're not equal to the sovereign. That's three or four maxims of law. So you start adding all these things together, and it puts you in your place. You don't have this power to overrule or overarch the state. You're counting on that sovereignty within the state to protect the actions that you have, while giving you the chance to live a private life under God. But all of the legal stuff stays in the legal realm. That's the idea of the trust and the model that this guy's presenting here, which, by the way, I'm in the process of setting myself up in this, because I spent 20 years searching for this. It took me forever to find this. And now that I found it, this is the first guy that I actually have trusted to do this, because everybody else is a fraud. Yeah. Let me tell you one more thing, how you know what you mentioned earlier. Most of the stuff that Anna Von writes and all these different groups do is literally listed on the FBI website as fraud. Right? It can get you in jail. You put a lien on a judge, it can put you in jail. It's a really screwed up thing to do. Imagine if someone did that to you and you couldn't get credit, you couldn't do anything. Hey, these guys, remember, hate the person, hate the persona, hate the flattering title. Like the Bible says, respect and love the man. The man is just being influenced by the artificial power and title of being a god, right? That's a lower god. So hate the DMV worker, but love the woman or man that's behind the mask, right? Remember that. Remember, hate the title, not the man. So when it comes to, let me just give you an example. There's a commercial going on, and this is one of the greatest assets that the fraud has. And you'll recognize this is another thing. If they tell you that you need to do it if you don't do it their way, specifically their ways, they instruct you, then you're going to fail. Well, yeah, because here's what they're telling you to do. They're telling you, look, don't do as government instructs, okay? Don't send your paperwork to the correct office. No. Send it here. Why? Well, there's a
Right.
commercial going on right now. It's called Title Lock, I believe. And it's got this criminal on there who goes through the element. He says it's a one-page document. With a one-page document, I can turn it in to the court clerk, the office, and and that page basically takes over the ownership of your property, and then they sell your property out from under you. You can't do a damn thing. That is one of the crimes that's committed. Why are they doing it with the court clerk? And then the court clerk comes on and he says, the reason that this is successful is because certain offices who are intaking applications and requests and paperwork to file, right? They are not allowed to and must file the paperwork even if they know it's fraudulent. They're not allowed to say, "Hey, boss, got another Avoidance rights one here. You should read this one. Oh man, it's hilarious." No, they have to freaking file it. And so what happens? And this is why the gurus say, "Okay, don't send it to this office. No, send it to this office," because they know they're going to file the paperwork. That gives the guru and you time to think that you've succeeded. So I sent a letter. And the letter says, if you don't respond within 30 days, this becomes law. Well, but that's not how you're not a lawmaker. That's not how law works. So you think that because they filed the paperwork and they didn't respond, honestly, don't give a shit about you. They're just doing their paperwork. They're just like you at your job doing your paper. They're just filing and filing and filing. That's all they do. They don't care. And then 3, 5, maybe even 10 years later, you're sitting there going, yes, I got this property, I got this allodial title because I say it's allodial, right? Or I've got a land patent, and I filed it and I told them it's a land patent, therefore it is, right? And then the government, being this ridiculously unorganized thing, because it's just slaves, you just take paperwork for slaves, they catch up on their paperwork,
Right.
and all of a sudden, hey, here's this property that they've been ignoring their tax, and so they hit the victim of the guru who thinks they have a loaded title with this giant lien on the property. It says, if you don't pay the tax, we're gonna foreclose and sell your property at auction, just like you said. And guess what? These people, I mean, it's not like they're saving the money that they paid tax for just in case, right? Now they're spending it on frivolous stuff because they're not self-governing. These aren't people who've spent years and years learning the process and doing what you and I. No, they're just victims of a sham, and they feel like they've done something spectacular. They feel like they're free, and then all of a sudden, bam. All because the guru had you file your paperwork not with the correct spot. And they'll say it specifically, do not follow these directions. If you follow these directions, it won't work. Right. Yeah, because they're catching the fraud. No, you file it over here where they won't look at your paperwork. They have to file it no matter what. Then you have the false sense of confidence. The guru goes away. You feel satisfied like you actually were correct and you did something reasonably, lawfully. And it turns out it's all fraud. And in the end, you will pay for it. It might be 10 years. Who knows how long it'll be? How big and how unorganized is that particular government, right? So that's the truth about what most of this is. Most of this relies on that sort of knowledge of offices that are required to file paperwork, and literally cannot call out fraud when they see it. So be very careful when that's my warning.
Wow. Yeah, that's some new information that heard for the first time. So amazing. And in 1985, the California Court of Appeals for the First District, they imposed a penalty of $5,000 on a person who claims ownership to a parcel of land through an alleged federal land patent. This is in 78 Carol Landy. She was charged with slander of title and interference with contract by the landowners. And so she recorded land patents and a declaration of a land patent against the the landowner's properties. And this is in Suez versus Landy. And so the United States Supreme Court has plainly stated that land transferred by federal land patent is subject to the same limitations as any other land under state jurisdiction. And so we hold the true, and I'm quoting this from the Supreme Court, okay? This is what this says. We hold the true principle to be this, that whenever the question in any court, state or federal, is whether a title to land which once has been the property of the United States has passed, that question must be resolved by the laws of the United States. But whenever, according to those laws, the title shall have passed, then that property, like all other property in the state, is subject to state legislation. So far as legislation is consistent with the admission that the title passed and vested according to the laws of the United States. And so only the state constitution and laws provide you with exemptions from property taxation, right? I can get a homestead exemption in a lot of states out there. Probably the most famous one is not California. California might be one of them, but I know Texas and Florida is definitely those states that do have that. And none that I know of grant any exemptions for allodial title or land patent because that doesn't exist. It was one, and like Clint said, it was once issued by the U.S. government a long time ago when this country was first starting. But once the U.S. government releases land within the boundaries of a state to the public, state taxes apply according to law. And so here's your proof from the U.S. Supreme Court that land patents and allodial titles are bullshit. And so another case law I want to cite from Supreme Court is actually, no, I typed that twice, my bad. I already read that one. So, okay. So of course the US can still obtain the land to build a trail, let's say, a public easement, but it'll have to pay just compensation under the rules of eminent domain in the Fifth Amendment taking clause. That is if you own the land in your person, right? And a land patent is a nation's conveyance of title property. It's not yours, it's the nation's. But it does not immunize property from taxation. And so the owner must still pay taxes on it subjected to assessed value and provisions in the state's constitution and laws. Florida's constitution and laws clearly describe what property gets taxed under what circumstances and how to get exemptions from part or all of the tax. And so if an exemption doesn't apply to you, then you owe the tax and the circuit court will sell it out from under you if you don't pay it with the lawful time limit on.
The point, I think, that the few legitimate PMAs that I think I have come across that actually, try to help people, all say the same thing, which is this is not a tax shelter. This is not tax avoidance scheme. This has, if you're part of the tax protest movement, kindly piss off and go on your way. That's not what we're here for, right? It's not a tax avoidance. Taxes are necessary. I mean, there's a point where you got to say, I appreciate having roads to drive on. I appreciate certain things. I appreciate lots of things that I think we take for granted. Tax avoidance is you might as well. That's one of the. I think a lot of the gurus, the false stuff comes from that same tax protest movement that was going on in the 60s and 70s. It's morphed over the years. It's become Truth Patriot Radio and the Patriot mythology and all that.
Yeah.
All of which I now call BS on, even though I was a part of it, promoting some of the mythologies because I believed in such things as the Constitution, and I believed these were good. I didn't know that it was the formation of an international law of nations, nation state. I didn't know all of the things I know now. So it's easy to be, I think, patriotic. It's easy to fall into Stockholm syndrome, which is to love your master, right? To fly its flag and that kind of thing. You know, when you understand that the United States is an occupying, militarized thing, and that you're under its military rule, which
Yeah.
can turn into martial law at
Right.
at the drop of a hat, that changes things. When you read the declarations of the end of the Civil War, and it says, "Hey, Texas," who says, "We're a republic, we're a republic." Well, it says, "Hey, Texas, if you ever get out of line again, we're just going to come in and beat the hell out of you, like we did already."
Yeah.
There's no pride. There's nothing to be proud of. This United States is a nation state, something built by the powers that be,
Right.
that are the royal bloodlines, to take over every country in the world, first form a republic, a self-governing commonwealth, then destroy it because people don't know how to be self-governing, and then form this nation state. That's exactly what happened to us. China's a republic, right?
Right.
Russia's a republic. What the hell? What else? Every country's a damn republic because we're all tricked into becoming one.
Yeah.
And whatever. I mean, for China to be a republic tells you a republic can be anything. It's just
Right.
Commonwealth, right? It doesn't mean anything except that it's, whoever kind of takes charge, takes charge. And so we're fooled into thinking there's some romantic aspect into that. And it really was, in my opinion, now just a trick to allow the international, mostly the bloodlines, right, the ruling elite of the nations, the kingdoms, to take back over all the power,
Mhm.
right? I mean, even Washington said about the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, it was nothing new, it was nothing original, it was purely the emotional world stance at the time. It was what was being promoted in all these revolutionary countries. So
Yeah.
it was just a way to basically take us over, start the nation state here, in a place where we despise national government, right? So we got to understand, if you don't understand or you don't get that aspect of this, that the United States is an occupying military force, read the Lieber Code, read all the different things that proves that you're under martial law. There's
Yep.
it's so fascinating. Just the fact that there's a military base a U.S. military base in every state.
Yeah.
That's the Lieber Code. If that's true, then you're under martial law, the marshals
Right.
of law. So, I mean, how do you tell a people who've been told their whole lives that they're free, that in fact the legal meaning of free is franchise, and that a franchise doesn't mean what you think it does, right? Um, you're it's a form of voluntary slavery. So I don't know. I all these I think Anna von Reitz and her ilk, I think they should be flogged. I think they should be
Yeah.
tarred and feathered.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think that these people who are taking advantage of people who are, you know, they 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 need to be made an example of.
Yeah. Same
They
with
really
David
do.
Straight. Those two that we mentioned, Anna and David, they're the biggest proponents of these things we're talking about: state nationals, loyal titles, land
No such
taxes.
thing as a state national, by the
Yeah.
way. And you can watch my video on the subject. It's like 10 hours long because there's so much information on this.
Yeah. And basically, just to summarize it, under Title 8, it clearly says that a national is a U.S. citizen. That term is a U.S. citizen possession, and that's codified in the United States Code. And so these people are trying to say they're sovereign because I'm a state national. Okay, so you're saying that you're sovereign based on a
But
term
but
that's codified. And that's
but
an oxymoron.
a national means you give allegiance to whoever. If you're
Right.
it doesn't even make sense in the end.
And they always try
It's
to
like an
use that.
oxymoron, right?
Yeah. And
So the other thing is, I have Anna von Reitz in one of her phone calls where she says outright, "Well, everybody's confused. I'm looking at the definition of state national, and it says exactly what." unless I'm from Samoa and didn't get one of the possessions of the United States. You want to be a
Yeah,
possession of the United States? Go right ahead.
right.
But she says, we don't understand exactly. And Anna von Wright, she comes on and she says, well, it's not a government. You're not asking for to be a state national in their system. You're a state national in our system.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, so you made up the word state now. You made it up,
right.
and you pass out little cards and says you're now a state national. You're in my little club. You lying little.
Yeah,
Oh,
and the state
oh.
national groups like the Purple Thumbs and Anna von Riker and the David Strait groups, those are just private membership associations. Why would I join their PMA when I can create my own?
Well, half
And
of them, I don't think half of them even really understand that they are a PMA.
a lot of them don't. Some of them are starting to do it because it's trendy now.
Yeah.
Now they're catching on. And now David Strait, he's selling PMAs because he can't
And this
sell
is
his
why I
own.
never wanted to talk about it, but I couldn't help myself. I was like,
Yeah,
I spent all this time, all these years, the people followed me all these years. I have to tell them the end, right? I finally found privacy, and here's really what it boils down to.
yeah,
How do you not talk about it, right?
right. And what we're covering, in the U.S. code and the definition of a national, you can look in Title 8, 1101, subsection 821 through 822, and it clearly says what a state national is codified as defined to be a U.S. possession, right? And so it's just funny to me because a lot of them use that exact same thing and try to outsmart me with that, but really they don't know what they're saying.
The other thing is, I think it's Section 8, yeah, Title 8,
Yeah,
where
Title
it
8.
says that there's only one agency that issues passports. Okay, it's the United States. You don't get a passport from the state. You get it. I'm like, God, people, look, it's right there. It says no one else can issue a passport but the United States. You're telling me the United States is issuing a passport to someone who's not claiming the United States?
Right.
That doesn't even make sense,
It's
right?
all federal. I mean, there's
It's just crazy.
it,
Absolutely nuts.
yep.
But it sounds good.
I know. It's I call it the new we know we have the new age religion, but this is like a new form of the new age religion. It's like the patriot religion. And so
Well,
yeah.
my other thought is, I'm like, I mean, I had a court case where I should find it and read it, but it basically says, this guy's quoting Anna von Reitz, and they say this so-called Anna von Reitz is a self-proclaimed Alaska judge or something like that,
Oh,
right?
geez.
And talks about how she's fraudulent and shouldn't be listened to. And this is in the court case. This is what the court considers her, and the people who follow her. They're going to instantly know if you mention her name that you're just absolutely on the wrong course.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to say, because at the very least, you should be asking, show me proof of success, like a tax
Right.
protest movement. Every single one of those guys been put in jail, fined, whatever.
Yeah.
Show me proof that your tax protest ever worked, and not a single one of them can do it, because it's it's not your system. You're not going to change the law. You're not a lawmaker. None of this applies, because and I think this is the number one rule now that I always remember in everything I do. Stop trying to act privately in the public. It's not going to freaking work.
Yeah.
Period. Don't act private in public. It's not going to work unless you actually are private, and in which case you wouldn't be in the public.
Yep. Yeah, and Anna von Braun, correct me if I'm wrong, Clint, but I'm pretty sure she's in prison.
If that is the case, I can't say that she doesn't deserve it. I mean, I like I said, I would rather see a public flogging.
Right.
I would rather see a video of her tarred and feathered. But if she went to prison for fraud after all the things I've seen that say, look, if she's in court cases and they're calling her a fraud, that was my question, by the way. Why isn't she in being indicted for fraud? when
Yeah.
she's instructing all these gurus. Why aren't they being put in jail? And you know what the answer I
Right.
think is? I think the answer is the
Agents.
same reason that they're filing all these papers, because eventually they're going to collect a huge freaking fine and take the house.
Mhm.
They're gonna charge you all these fines. They're making money off this fraud. Why would they
Oh
stop
yeah.
it? Right?
Right.
Why would government then stop the fraud if they're making all kinds of money
Right.
because you don't know you're committing an FBI crime?
Yeah. These gurus are giving the courts business because the courts are a business. And so and Dave, she kind of fell off the map because a lot of her followers got put away. And now the new rising star is David Straight.
Oh yes, but
And
I gotta say, thing about David Straight, man, he is a orator from
oh
hell. I mean,
yeah.
he
Yeah.
knows how to really lay it on thick.
Oh
So
yeah.
be really careful with him.
He's slick presenter and
Man.
really great salesman, honestly.
Yeah.
He sells you the pain, right? And then kind of makes you question your plan B. And then he comes in with the solution. So yeah, when it comes to the speaking and the sales aspect, he's mastered it. He admits, I've seen it in his videos, he admits he works for the State Department. He tells everyone secretly Trump is still president. And JFK Jr. is vice president. I can't remember what position he gave himself. It was like some high level presidential office. Basically, he's like,
Well,
I'm working.
none of that matters because the Galactic Federation,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
Oh, he waits
All
for
right.
Space Force. Yeah, he works for
Yeah,
Space Force.
Space Force.
He said that. He said he was a Navy SEAL, all this stuff. He's even admitted before he's a lawyer. I've seen a few of his followers go away. I just watched a video this morning of one of his followers get sent to jail.
I mean, I've made a lot of effort to try to teach people to beware of these people, these gurus,
Yeah,
these people, if they're selling it, whatever. And it drives me crazy to know that people are falling for it. So I mean, I don't spend all this time learning all this and exposing these people just for just to get a bad reputation, right?
right.
I mean, people hate me for exposing them, but I'm sorry
Yeah,
if you're committing these frauds, you're going to be exposed. And so
yeah,
far, I haven't found anybody that's not worth exposing. So watch
right.
yourself, buddy.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, look, if I'm incorrect about something, I will stop and correct. I've been wrong before, and I've had to do that. But yeah, so anyways, enough about those guys. But yeah, ever since the Civil War, we've been in a post-colonial society. So between all of these things that I've mentioned and Clint has mentioned, that's why I never talk about land patents or allodial titles. It's just a bunch of woo-woo nonsense.
It would be more accurate to consider to study feudal law and consider yourself in a neo-feudal state, basically, I think.
That's exactly right. Very well said. We live in a feudal system, and it's best to just acknowledge that. Unless your family has had land in a allodial title going way back to the colonial times, and the beneficial interest has stayed in the family, they're no good. And so I've looked into these things over the years, but just kept finding negative outcomes for people when they go down these roads. And a lot of these people, like that lady I was showing you guys, I couldn't play her video, but she was saying that land patents and loyal titles protect you from the state regulating your use of the land. And so I think we've covered that enough where that isn't true. And so don't go down these rabbit holes. And really, guys, the stuff I present and demonstrate for people is all about using the system and blending in. My number one goal is risk management at the end of the day. And
Well,
so,
your number one goal is privacy.
yeah,
So I mean,
privacy
that's the hard part.
privacy is a property right, and people need to respect that as so. And so when you start messing with the sovereignty stuff, you're at risk that I can't manage for you guys, and then you enter yourself into these public venues. Look, David Straight, he does say some kernels of truth. I will give him that.
They say he's a smooth criminal, man.
Yeah,
That's what it is. So I would like to ask you a question. Okay,
yeah,
I've studied a lot of different things over the years, but I'm a little stuck on one thing.
okay.
It can be said that to prove there is a trust, there should be a trustee who holds the legal title and the beneficiary who holds the equitable title. Okay?
Mhm.
So we had a legal title and then the equitable title. Is that the same as usufruct?
The same as what?
As like the use, the ownership and the use? Like one has the ownership and one has the use?
Yeah, so the beneficiary has the use. The trustee only can maintain the property, really.
Okay, so in other words, that's the same as feudal. The lord owns the land, you're on the land, and so you have an equitable use of the land only, you don't own the land.
Right, the
Okay,
trustee doesn't own it, the beneficiary does. Yeah.
okay, so all right, so whenever there is a trust, the nominal title to the property, nominal meaning by name, right? The name of the title or the name on the title, the nominal title to the property is vested trustee, and the equitable title or right to enjoy or use the property is vested in the beneficiaries.
That is correct, yeah.
Okay, this is the question that I think we all need to start learning, because
Yeah.
it says this is the distinctive feature of a trust which evolved after the emergence of equity. At common law, the owner of the legal title was the person entitled to its enjoyment, and therefore the legal owner and beneficial owner were inseparable. However, with the larger emergence of equity, the legal owner and the beneficial owner were separated and vested in different persons. For instance, if a land was conveyed by one person to the other, well, I don't need to read that. The point I'm trying to make is at some point, because we're all in part of the common patriotic mythos is that we should be in common law a lot of the times.
Right, yeah.
And I'm not necessarily disagreeing to the point where the Bible is actually the foundation of the common law until you get into that area where you're contracting, and then you lose all those great protections that come from it. But at some point, when it came to the property, I'm imagining, we went into what is called equity law. So we need to have a discussion, and if you're not prepared for this, we can do it another time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's very important to understand the difference between, because if at common law the owner and the beneficiary were inseparable, and now in this time you have a trustee that's holding it for the, what's it called, the ceste cuvee, the dead whatever.
Yeah.
So that's a completely different thing than the common law system. So we're actually talking about going into and utilizing equity law. So let's talk about that.
And so in a trust, there is no equity, it's interest. There's a difference between interest and equity. And so common law can only really overside equity, but trust law is somewhat separate from common law. And so common law can't determine who has whatever interest in the trust.
Equity, when we think of equity, let's just take an example of the sort of lowbrow form of equity. When I think of equity, I think of the amount of value in a home, let's just say, that is the difference between the value and the amount owed in a loan. And that would be what most people would think of equity. Or this new age, whole thing that they've turned equity into, which is, this race bait stuff that the woke shit. Right. So I don't want to confuse the lower, the sort of lowbrow form of like a slave with his mortgage has a little bit of equity in the property he doesn't own in the first place. Right. With the kind of equity that we're talking about here. We're talking about equality, right? We're talking about interest in something, but I'm just unclear of the difference between.
So in business, let's say you and I start a joint venture and we convey that under either a corporation or an LLC. And let's say we do a 50-50 split. And so I'm going to have 50% equity, you're going to have 50% equity. And so whatever money comes in, whatever we pay ourselves, because we have 50-50 split on the equity, the money just flows that way. And so because we have 50% of the shares, that's what equity is, just ownership of the shares, really. And so, kind of like, in the stock market, they're called equities because they're buying shares. So it does get that term kind of gets convoluted, but yeah, common law, it does have jurisdiction over that kind of stuff, right? If you and I had a dispute, let's say, over an equity dispute, that's where a common law court would come in. That's where things have kind of morphed, ever really since after the Civil War when it comes to common law and business and that interfacing. But yeah, in a trust though, there is no equity; it's just interest.
But you'd be going to, if there were some actual dispute,
Yeah.
they would call it a court of equity, not a court of common law, right? Or equity law or equity. These terms are familiar to me, and I haven't looked at them in a long time, so I'm a little rusty.
I'm admittedly am too. But typically they're gonna. I'm pretty sure they would call that court of common law.
All right. Well, we need to look into that. Something we both.
That's a great question, though. Yeah.
One more thing here: the duality of ownership is the distinctive feature of a trust. Secondly, there should be a trust property, which is the subject matter of the trust. So if I go to court and then the matter of subject matter, what is the matter before the court? The property is the matter.
Right.
The trust property, whatever the property is in the trust, is the subject matter in the court. Nothing else really, except the trust itself. The property may be movable or immovable. Examples of trust property: house, land, shares, money, car, etc. So it seems to me that if the land itself is just put into a trust, that most of the things that people talk about would be taken care of, because the land itself is now in a different. It's if you're putting the land in trust, then you've sort of removed it from the public anyway, right? I mean, that's
correct.
Why do I need a patent then if I've already put it in a trust? Because I think what we have to understand is that a trust is, especially the family trust, right, where you can create a coat of arms, and you're starting what these people call the right to bear arms. Yeah. The right to bear arms is the right to bear herald, is the right to bear your family, your trust, your family. It's not guns, right? So that's why it's so important to them, because then that offers them this sensibility of privacy through the trust, right? So the trust is the formation of essentially if you will, whether it's real or adopted, a bloodline, a family.
Yeah.
In a perpetual way, just like a family, right? It's just like nature, where there's different generations, and but it's making it to the point where there's no probate, there's nothing to dispute, because you're not transferring the property. The land is never going to go out of the trust. It never goes out of the trust and comes back in. Therefore, it stays within the equity type of situation. So there really is no dispute that can be made. I can imagine if someone tried to put a land patent on something that's already in a trust, that would
they'd catch on fire.
Stupidest thing you could do. But I mean, really, I think that has to be. I think this has to be understood in a way. I got a couple books on heraldry. The Washington arms are something that people should look into, because Washington was practically the king.
Right.
The flag is actually the arms of Washington that they fly at different buildings and churches. I mean, it's crazy when you read about it. So, like I said, it's what is this thing that we're calling a trust? Well,
Mm.
you're really, I mean, would you say it's safe to say that you're transferring, you're going back, if you will, to the law that deals with blood and inheritance?
Yes. Because I say all the time, your family is a trust. Your
Right.
family is a PMA.
Whether you like it or not. I mean, it's,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Because and it does relate to the blood because the blood itself is a vessel that goes throughout time. And so that's why we have to convey trust the way we do. Like I have clients that they have a situation where they have property, and some of these cases, even their like relatives live on that same property. Is kind of a nice spread, like the family literally just inhabits the whole property, um, different parcels of it. And so the way I wrote up the trust for them is that the family members can never sell the land, and because we put that in the law of the trust, that's the law for the family. And so, and I even wrote for these families that that's how it's going to be done for eternity.
And just to, bring up the other point, when Arnold Schwarzenegger tried to sell or tried to close that public access to that beach, they threatened the state to take back that land privately.
Mm.
So they had to keep it open to the public or lose the control and revenue from the beach. So
Wow.
that, to your point, what you just said, that's exactly true.
Okay, so Clint, we got a question for you in the chat.
For me,
Yeah, it's Clint, what are your thoughts on Russell or Russell hyphen J Gold and his claim to being the Postmaster General and capturing the flag? Have you ever heard of this guy? Because
I
I
don't
have.
think so.
Oh man, that's it's kind of a fun subject. It's basically this guy from Wyoming. He had a business partner named David Windmiller, and
Oh, well, I could tell you, I'm not a big fan of that guy.
yeah, so
That's the speech, right? The
the quantum
atomic
grammar,
speech.
yeah,
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 not a big fan.
and a lot of these guys' followers, especially David's followers, unfortunately, they were put away as well, kind of like these other gurus we
Yeah,
talked about.
I mean, you just why? Why are they being put away? Because
Right,
what they're doing isn't self-evident. It's not something that's natural. Speech, words are not natural. You
right,
can quantumize anything you want to, but speech is man-made.
yeah,
And as soon as you think you figure out something, they go in and change the definition. Why do you think I spend so much time in legal dictionaries? Because at the time the legal dictionary was written, they attempted to have the best case law that defined the word, not their own
yep,
opinion, but the case law or the history. Black's law, a lot of history, right? Secondary source, but a lot
yep,
of history around the word. Other dictionaries are more primary that they actually use for the current meaning of the terms. These words are going to change. You think that you're going to go back to some time period where the word meant this and therefore it means the same thing today.
right,
I got news for you. Even if you look at who decides what the Constitution says, that's the Supreme Court is very proud to say it's them. They're the
yeah,
ones that decide what the law is. Not the lawmakers. Lawmakers make the law, but the courts decide whether the law stands or not. Hell, the
right.
jury can even nullify. I mean, so quantum language? Oh man,
Well,
what's next,
well,
right?
and David Windmiller claimed he was a federal judge. So does Russell J. Gold, right? But we've never seen evidence of any of those things. And look, David
Well, Anna von
Windmiller.
Reitz is a judge.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, all these
yeah,
people.
she's a judge.
A lot of these gurus actually got a lot of their stuff from David Windmiller and Russell J. Gold. It's just kind of a
Okay, well,
rebrand.
so who's this guy that he was asking what I thought of him?
Russell J. Gold is his younger business partner
Why
because
does that
David.
sound familiar?
You've probably heard of him because he was partners with David Windmiller ever since the '90s. And David Wynn Miller, he died a few years ago. So Russell J. Gold is kind of was passed on the torch, right? And so he's the biggest proponent now of the quantum grammar. He claims he's captured the Title IV flag, 1999, when the bankruptcy expired under the third bankruptcy moratorium. Look, a lot of the research was correct about the bankruptcies and the bankruptcy law, international bankruptcy, stuff like that. They did bring up some brilliant things, but they're wrong about some things too. And so like, it's kind of like all these other gurus. They have kernels of truth, but then they have all these other claims that they have no proof of, right? And so, and kind of like Clint said, their big thing is the quantum grammar, and that gets outside of all of the, the fiction, they call it. And look, I do agree on some level the courts do operate in fiction, but doesn't mean that quantum grammar is going to save you in a courtroom. I mean, when have we seen that work? It never works.
I would love to see someone stand up and tell a judge, well, sorry, judge, this word means this.
Right.
Or this law should be applied like you're not there in that capacity. That's not what you're there for. And if you try that shit, I'm sorry. It's just like the court said, he's quoting this crazy lady who thinks she's a judge. And it's like they already know all these people. They already know about these people. And the reason I tell you, the reason they're not being put in jail for fraud is because I think the government loves the victims, loves the fines and the fees, and that's my only thing I can think of, really.
Yeah, and like I said, David and Russell, I think they're very intelligent people, but they've just gone down these rabbit holes.
Well, this is no different than worshiping any other idol. Right? I'm sacred geometry. Everything in the world is made from math.
Right.
No, there are no numbers. There are no symbols. That's all man-made.
Exactly.
Okay, you don't go in and define or redefine something that is a patented property of the Bar Association, which is the law. I mean, it's not your place.
Exactly.
And anybody that goes in there and does that is going to fail because it's not even the purpose or the subject matter. Well, they know what the words mean.
Yeah.
And if they don't, they're going to make it up.
And guys, Clint, he's done, I mean, look, this is just one of his books. And guys, you should get a copy of this. I'll put a link for it in my Telegram, but he's done a lot of research on word magic. Yes, there is word magic. We all know that. And so that's where, when Russell and David, they were talking about the word magic, that stuff is true. But again, when you go into courthouse, that doesn't matter. They're not going to respect that what a word actually means, right? Because you're in their courtroom. You just left US soil. Like you're open to their devices. And so a judge, he's just going to laugh at you. And then David, he was telling people, when the judge calls your name, you tell the judge, I am not that person. I'm full : Russell-J : Gold. I'm just using that name example because that's in the chat. I can't remember how they format that always. But when you start saying that you're not the straw man, I've seen this a lot happen. I've even had a person tell me this, that he tried that game with the judge, and the judge just said, okay, well, I'm going to have you as a failure to appear in court then.
Yeah, well, because the judge is only looking for two things. Someone who's ignorant, dumb, and has doesn't know any better than to appear magically as a fictional entity called a person.
Yeah.
Or its agent. What's its agent? Well, you're its agent or an attorney. So either you're appearing as the person, or you're appearing as its agent, or you have paid an attorney, in which case you've already lost because the attorney is an officer of the court.
Right.
Here's my big mystery that I've probably taken my whole life to solve because I can't figure it out for the life of me. How in the hell does the bar associate a private association? What does that have to do with me? How is their law applicable to me if they're a private association and I'm not a member?
Yep.
Is it because the person is a member? Is it because the person is said to be by government under the bar? I cannot figure out why in the for the hell I cannot figure out why the bar association and all of its law, which is all law, public law, right?
Yep.
How does it apply to me if I'm not a member? And
That
I can only think it's the person.
that is a whole question that, man, I don't even know how to answer
Well,
because the
they
bar
won't answer.
association, oh,
They'll
they
just
never
say, "Well, I
will.
can't give you legal advice, but you can go talk to an attorney."
Right. Yeah, and it's just a secret handshake club, and they're the gatekeepers of law, and they think they own the law, right? And so that's a brilliant question, Clint. I don't even know how to answer that, honestly.
Well, by crossing the bar, are you agreeing to their membership rules?
That's what a lot of these gurus say.
I mean, I don't know. I don't get it.
That's what
I
these
really don't
gurus
get
say,
it.
but who knows? I mean, they are into the symbolism, so I wouldn't put it past them. But yeah, that is a good question though. I think really you'll never know because it's kind of like the Masons. Well, a lot of them are Masons, especially the judges who are all bar members.
And
And so it's just,
police,
yeah, all
the
of them.
fraternities.
It's just a big, it's like that George Collin clip you sent me. It's a big club and you ain't in it.
And you
So
ain't in it.
you're never going to know the inner machinations of these secret clubs. The judges in judge school, they got all these secret symbols on their robes, and they'll never tell you what it actually means. You think the bar members are bad, or the lawyers are bad. The judges, that's even a higher level secret club. So we're never going to be privy to that because we're not Masons.
I mean, it's almost tempting to go through the trouble, since I've studied it so much anyway, of just going and joining the bar just to see what the hell it is.
I know.
But
I thought about it.
I would never do that. So
That's the thing. I don't want to even people know that I'm a bar member. It's just like that puts me in the camp where I consider being a traitor, really, and an enemy to man, you know, with their fake ownership of law.
I get a kick actually if you go read their canons. Their canons
Oh,
are their foundational law. They don't follow their own their canon. One of their canons is that no lawyer should be advertising their services.
correct.
You turn on the TV.
It was illegal until the 70s.
Yeah, well, it's still a canon that they shouldn't, but they do.
Yeah,
It's
that is a good
considered
point.
really like low level, but there's no honor in it anymore. It's
No,
whatever it was or whatever it might have been has completely been taken over by the most cowardly, unhonorable men on earth. No one,
yeah,
and I know a lot of people have gone through the process and seen what it's about and quit, and
yep.
those are people to be admired, not now. The question when you're talking about someone like David Strait or whatever, well, that's I don't know if you'd necessarily trust these kind of people,
Yeah,
so
yeah. And the guy that asked you that question about David Wood Miller and his partner, he says, "I appreciate the response. Sounds like it's best to avoid the courts at all costs." Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I always tell people,
you
don't
know what
get into that.
the court is for anyone who has any knowledge. The mail is your court. It's a battle of, you get a letter, you respond to the letter, but you say no thank you, basically, or whatever you're going to say, and then it's just a battle of what I find interesting is, like, I talked to somebody about a friend of mine got a jury notice, right? And people get so concerned about, do you know what a jury notice is?
Tell me.
It's a fishing expedition. It would be like the IRS sending out papers to say, "Hey, we would like all taxpayers to identify yourself as taxpayers." The jury notification, first clue: look at the postage. Is it paid for postage? Is the government paid for the? No, these are
Mm,
private things that are going out, so they're stamped. right? They're paying for postage. Government doesn't pay for postage
Right.
if it's official, right? Second, is it certified? Am I receiving it from some agent that's making sure that I've received it? Therefore, they can prove that I. No, there's no proof that you got a notice. There's no follow up. You just show up, sign up as a volunteer. It's you ignore it. It's
Right.
nothing. I mean, anybody can send out. It's a cattle call basically, and
Yeah.
the fools show up, and anybody knows any better just says, "Oh yeah, screw that." I mean, why would you? But people get so concerned. Oh, it's my civic duty. You know,
Right.
I'm gonna get paid $5 a day, and yes, no, most of the stuff that comes from government, it's not official. It's not being sent to you in any official capacity. So,
Yeah.
you
Just based
just
on the postal mechanics of that. That's amazing. Yeah.
yeah.
That's so true. And yeah, so guys, and thanks for coming on, by the way, Clint. I really do want to do more of these with you. Guys, get a copy of his book, The Straw Man. Again, I'll link this in my Telegram for you guys. I mean, so much golden nuggets in here. He's been doing a lot of research for years,
As
decades.
is evidenced by the aged look and gray hair. Yes.
Yeah, he knows a little too much, let's just say. So, and I always have Q&A at the end for everyone. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to shout them out. So we'll open up to Q&A if you guys have any questions.
They're lining up.
Yeah. I mean, oh, yeah, that was a great question though from that guy. Um, guys, I mean, you got a brilliant source of information here. So feel free to ask questions like this guy did. Okay, Manuel has a question. My uncle physically has the land grant from the King of Spain. What can we do with that to protect our family ranch?
Where is this?
I believe this is in Texas. Yeah, he says Texas.
Um. So I worked at a farm, and the farmer had the original land grant, and he had the right of way on the road, so he could technically close the road down at any time, which was fantastic.
Wow.
Farm equipment always has the right of way on any road, and he had the water rights. I mean, he had everything. This guy had everything, and they opened a dairy farm. But in order for them to sell their milk to Costco, Costco required them to incorporate.
Mm,
Now, the second that that land went into a public corporation, all those private rights were trampled on. They started eminent
yeah.
domaining the city, the state. They started eminent domaining the land. They started to build houses on, right, a lower cause. Than all this stuff started happening to this family simply because they incorporated it and made it a public entity, a public vessel in commerce, whereas before it was completely private.
Yeah.
So the first question I would ask is, what's the history of the land, right? I mean, when you say I mean, you have the physical copy of the land grant.
Yep.
I would
From,
think. I
from
would
the King of
think.
Spain.
Well, I would think that that would mean that if there's no mortgage, if there's no liens against the property,
Yeah.
well, then I would believe that you could. I mean, it's private. I mean,
Yeah.
you like. I'll just give you an example of the things we would do. The land itself was still private. So, in the area that I live, which is Draper, Utah, there's ordinances against all these different things. Well, can't have a bonfire, right? So we were cleaning up this farm, so we would just take everything and just burn it, right? Because that's how it's been done for generations. And we would start this massive, massive, massive bonfire. People would see it from up on the hill, and they'd call the fire department. Fire department would come down, and uh, there's nothing they can do because it's private land. And you see, the farmer knew that, and this is why I said at the beginning, you have to act the part, right? It's not. It's one thing to say, "Hey, look, I have a piece of paper that says this is this." It's a whole nother thing to be self-governing and man enough to say this is private land. You have no authority here. I'll tell you what.
Yep.
The police station, the municipal building, was eminent domain right in the front part of his property because they incorporated, right? So that was the beginning of all their problems. So if you've got nothing, if you've got no public interest, no public easements, nothing that's like a corporation or anything like that, you've kind of got a powerful thing there. I would imagine.
Yeah, Manny, I mean, you got a golden ticket right there, man. So you guys just hold on to that forever, as long as you can. It sounds like you're in the most ideal situation when it
Well, I
comes
think
to
they're
that.
still respected. Because like I said, they had to ask him permission to even close the road and stuff. So it was pretty interesting to see the workings. But once you incorporate, once you do that, you do end up forfeiting a lot of that privacy.
Right.
Basically.
And the beneficial interest hasn't changed because it's stayed in the family throughout history. So yeah, man, that's a great question, Manny. Gosh, I wish more of us were in that situation.
Yeah, now a land grant, that's a whole other thing than a land patent. That's the original assignment of the land. That holds a lot of power, again, unless you have gone public. So those things are still respected, at least on this local level. So I would look into it. I would definitely, certainly if I had it, I would be like all about it. And like I said, when you this let me put it this way, this would be a perfect example to open a trust, because what better way to show that you're a what better way to bear your arms, right? Bear your heraldry, your connection to that land and that grantor, than to actually prove and create your own. I mean, you can go back and you can use your family's arms. You could do it. There must be something about your family that is of the pure blood or whatever, the germane to Spain or germane to something.
Yeah, he's related to, I believe, some Spain royalty, based on our past conversations. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave.
Here's one suggestion. Go find in any country. Go find a Spanish consulate. Start there.
Yeah, brilliant.
Find an activist in the consulate. I know that when a Japanese guy was getting basically robbed by his trustor, put him in a convalescent home, stole his home, and all that stuff. They contacted the consulate, and the consulate, because he was Japanese American, couldn't speak very good English. Consulate came out and helped him, and they will bend over backwards to help you because you're of the Spanish line of, original whatever. So I would pursue it myself.
Yeah.
Golden ticket, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, Manny,
No, the other aspects of that, I assume if he's holding it, that the family has never given it up. They didn't just keep it as a souvenir.
I believe that's the case. Manny, do you want to?
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. My grandfather's brother, he got his PhD in history, and he taught at Texas A&M, and to him that was like the coolest thing. So he keeps it like in a case, a glass case. It's pretty cool. it's like a family,
Do you happen to have your family heraldry, your coat of arms or anything?
I believe it is two lions facing away from each
Well, I
other.
mean,
We are we
if
are
you
Sephardic Jews.
if you have that, that would be. I mean, you're like I said, you might be on a gold mine. I'm not giving you any kind of advice or anything, but it sounds like that would be something. I mean, if it was me, I'd pursue that to no end.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, my family's fairly sheep-ish. They're all
Unf-
vaccinated.
Yeah,
So,
unfortunately, that's the case with a lot of people that I think would have it really easy trying to do this are just absolutely ignorant. There was a documentary that was made by Vice that all the black, all the people that got granted land in down south, the black people who were emancipated, freed, they were given, I guess, homestead land or some kind of land grants, and so it's been in their family, but you know they're not using the land properly for it to be respected in any way. So there is the higher land use problem with a lot of people. Like if you're mining land, well, then you can go claim land anywhere you want to in the BLM, right? But you have to show that you're using the land for that purpose. That's what Hal Anthony does. Uh, People like that, they're in the old mining law. But in a case where you're talking about this, you do have to be educated. You do have to. So these people, the lawyers go in and they file a claim and they trick them into giving up their land. Well, they're just living there in trailers, basically, poor, impoverished, with private land they don't even know they have. And it could be. I almost feel like we should go down there and organize them because they actually have the original grants of land from the government I don't know what you call that, reparations or homesteading or whatever. But
Right.
interesting story, and especially the way the bar attorney goes in there and just screws them over. So my recommendation would obviously be a trust first of all, and anything you do with the property. I mean, you're talking about a property trust, family trust, so that would be the best thing to do.
Yeah.
At worst, you're just reestablishing the family bloodline, the family crest, family arms. Use the same ones or create new ones, whatever you want. If you can find the old one, that would be great. So,
yeah, and just last year they got into a bit of a predicament. My grandfather's no, my grandmother's sister, who, so everyone's got 600 acres, and they're all of our relatives. They divide the land as the generations go. I guess that's how they've been doing it.
mhm.
And so our neighbor, who's a relative of ours, used to bring their cattle on, and we would get some kind of tax exemptions or something like that.
Free range kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And so our property taxes there were very low. But this year, they came onto the property and they said, "Hey," or I guess they didn't come onto the property. I guess they started poking around and saying, "Hey, you don't have cattle on your land." And I don't know how they did that. Drones, who knows?
Right.
But they said you don't have cattle on your land anymore. So we're going to charge you taxes back.
Is it open to free range?
No. It's divided by fences and
Yeah.
gates and all sorts of stuff. But yeah,
It sounds like I mean, I hate to say this, but it sounds like you have the perfect setup to start a PMA with all your relatives and protect this land.
yeah. Again, like all my aunts and uncles are boomers, and they are.
Oh, I get it, but I mean, I hate to when people are sitting on top of like this giant freaking golden egg and they don't even know, right? They just think
Yeah.
it's something shiny and ooh, look at that. It just drives me crazy because man, if you lose that, I
Well,
mean,
they're more interested in the oil.
Right,
They're,
right.
they have, I guess they have a contract with some company, and they
And
used to
see
pump oil back in the 80s and 90s, and then the
that
2000s rolled around,
that might be
and
where you have a problem because you've allowed easements or some other form. Yeah, it would take some research, but I mean, I would move to protect that pronto, at least your share.
yeah. Now
And
the end of the story is the USDA. They signed something with the USDA to where it's like, okay, you don't have to pay your property taxes, but now you're a conservator or something like that.
Hmm.
conservator of a trust.
No. It's like, oh, you're maintaining this as natural land or whatever.
Okay.
So, in other words, you're not going to build on it.
I don't know. In fact, that's a good question. It makes me sad because, for 400 years, my family's been there, and suddenly, it's like, oh, here comes the IRS, and they're saying they're going to charge. So here comes the USDA with a sweet deal. And what I'm worried about is that my grandfather signed away that golden egg he was sitting on.
Well, um, that's one of those things where you might be able, ignorance or, you, that's tough. That's really tough. That's why I asked if someone might have given up the rights or whatever. But the only thing you're going to be able to do is apply yourself and study and find the records. A lot of these people who promote the land patent and the claiming land and that kind of thing, it's the same thing. You go back and you do the research, or you're gonna put a claim on abandoned land, that kind of thing. You go back, you do the research, you look at the history of the titles and the deeds and everything, and come up with the history. And I'd be interested in what that conservatorship would be.
Yeah.
Because that might be a. Although, I mean, it's not permanent. You could end it at any time, I would think. It's a contract.
I hope so. Yeah.
Again, the maximum of law is that a contract must be ended the way it was begun, meaning it's you open it and then you close it with a signature. So, no, I'm stumped. But I would pursue it.
There's different flavors of conservations. One flavor that is okay to get that conservation status, then you have to make it like I almost want to say public park, but it's not necessarily public because it's still privately owned, but the public can come to it and use it. And there's other, kind of flavors of that as well. And so, yeah, I would, go to the forums that you got from the USDA or your family did, and call them up, talk to these people, see, what the finite details on that contract really is, and then go from there, try to reverse engineer it from there. But
do you know if it
my
was
grandpa's still around? My grandpa's still around. He's 97.
Okay.
And he's still sharp as,
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Because this is what I was afraid of. Are you sure it wasn't a conservatee or was it a conservator?
No, I've got no clue. I'm over here in the Bay Area, California.
Well,
and I just heard this over the phone a few months ago, and I'm a little worried.
a conservatorship is the appointment of a conservator by the court to manage a person's affairs who is unable to handle them due to their mental capacity, or in other words, an individual who handles the financial or daily life affairs of a conservatee, a party deemed incompetent by a court.
Well, hopefully he didn't sign that.
So in other words, it's a guardianship. So the question is he the conservator or the conservatee?
That's just a word I threw out there. I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I'm not as definitely not as learned as you guys on these matters. But yeah, that's all I remember is USDA, and it's supposed to be for like maintaining wildlife, I guess,
Okay,
like wildlife land, maybe. I don't know.
interesting. Yeah, I would definitely look into that, man, because sounds pretty important. So yeah, that's something we could, assist you with, especially since you're my PMA member, and I'm sure I can share other resources too that probably know more than we can even share. So
My suggestion first and foremost would, like I said, find a consulate or find some outlet to the, what would you call that, the family of, uh, I would probably say the consulate is your best bet. New York or maybe LA. I don't know. Let's see where do they have let's see where they have a consulate. Uh, let's see here. Embassy of Spain in the United States. So just type in Embassy of Spain in the United States, go to that website, and it has a list of consulates, and I would contact them.
smart.
But I mean that just seems the logical. Who else are you gonna you can contact the bar?
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean you need to find out, the power behind that before you start claiming it.
sure.
Yeah, I'll get the details. Thank you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry I didn't have more answers.
No, I was very vague. So
But
thank you.
keep us informed because that's pretty
absolutely.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Will do.
Yeah, and look, I'm learning stuff every day. I mean, that's a fun topic I would love to learn more about. So, Clint, we got another question for you from the chat. Clint, you mentioned earlier that Brandon was the first person you trust to assist you in creating your trust in PMA. After years of research, what convinced you to trust him, and what do you think you have come across the proper process sooner? Or how do you think you haven't come across the proper process sooner? No offense, Brandon, this is more a compliment in my opinion, given how young you are and the knowledge you possess.
Well, that's just it. It's the obvious aged wisdom. It's written all in the lines in his face, right? uh, someone I was talking to a friend, and he had seen. I can't remember how you met. What's his name?
Oh, Blake, he was
Blake.
at
Yeah.
one of my presentations I did in person,
Okay. And
private
so
event.
he gave me his number, and I said, and I won't tell you what our conversation was, but I said, look, if I really wanted to prove this concept, I would want to do something like this, and he'd already done it, and we're thinking about doing it again, and I won't tell you what that is at the moment, but
Yeah.
so I spent most of my time pouring through the Bible, which is a book of law, comparing it to the legal law, finding that all the time the Bible law and the legal law are at odds, right? And the Bible is basically telling you what not to do. The legal law tells you what to do. It's just everything is completely opposite. It's pretty fascinating actually to discover that. And so the whole time I'm going through, and I know there's this private realm, but I don't, and I know there's private roads, and I know there's private this and private that. I just don't understand it. And I'm going, and coming across different gurus and finding things fraudulent, and I've been teaching privacy, believe it or not. I've been teaching privacy, the kind of privacy that is talked about in the Bible, which means non-participation in the legal realm as much as possible, right? So I've been teaching people the moral aspect, the spiritual aspect of what that entails. What that it's about non-participation, about leaving Babylon and living according to that particular set of spiritual laws, the law of God, law of nature, whatever you want to call it. And so then I discovered the PMA model. And like anybody else looking into it, it's kind of like anything else. They're going to teach you a few things. They're going to tell you a few things, and then keep everything else to themselves because they don't want to give away their secrets, or they don't want to give away. My opinion on that is, you should eat crap and die, because you're basically keeping the keys to the kingdom to yourself, not letting I just hate secrecy. It's repugnant to me. Especially when you're talking about something like this. So I call up this guy, and I've learned more about the PMAs and trust law and everything else, not necessarily because of him, because of talking to him, but because of him referencing me to places, me starting to study myself. He gave me a little bit of hope, and I was running out of hope real quick, because it appeared, especially after learning about the prisoners of war and the Lieber Code and the nation-state model and all this international law of nations, I was about ready to quit. Honestly, I was about ready to be done with all of this, because the whole movement is bunk, basically. And I started calling out, people in the movement for being frauds, and so I'm not that popular, I guess. But I was canceled. I was censored. My documentaries were being taken down. Things were just looking bleak. So when I talked to Brandon, and I had sort of a similar, like, wow, this guy's young. I mean, wow, but like real smart, IQ off the charts, and answering all my questions in a way that jives with everything else I've researched, right? And he presented to me, answered my questions to the best he could. Questions from me, they're going to be pretty tough. And showed me the layout of everything, explained that, look, if you wanted to just, you could take you're going to get a copy of the paperwork. You could just take it and, be a jerk and do whatever else and become a guru yourself. But if you don't know this stuff, you're going to fail, right?
Yeah.
And first guy that I've met that actually had the answers, and the answers were not at all what I thought they'd be. Like, the whole concept is so foreign to most people that it takes a reversal of thought to even begin to think in the mode of privacy. So basically, all but a few of my stipulations, my questions were answered, and the ones that weren't answered, he was honest and said, "I don't know. We're all still working." And we started talking about doing some side things, businesses, and I gave him some money. I gave him in a trust situation, right? I mean, if you're gonna hire somebody, you're gonna pay them, right? If I'm gonna create a family trust, I'm gonna pay a lawyer to do it. The problem is, in a trust that you're doing with a lawyer, the trust is in public persons, not in private people, right? So the trust that my parents have will be the house will be left to the person that is Clint Richardson. But the trust that I'm creating for myself, my name's not, man, I'm nowhere to be found. Right? So it's like I said, you're using it the correct way. You're putting the ownership in the legal and the beneficiary and being the beneficiary. It's all of it now makes sense to me, and now I know all the right places to look. It set me in a whole new direction. Gave me hope, gave me a little bit of happiness, and he didn't skip town after I paid him, and we're still, I'm still stuck. The one thing I'm stuck on, honestly, and it's my fault, otherwise I'd be a lot further in the process. The one thing I'm stuck on is this notion of if anybody has information on this, I'd be sure happy to hear it, and that is private banking. That's the one thing I'm stuck on it, because I interviewed someone a long time ago about opening a private bank account. Banks were required to do it, and I'm just convinced that there's this way to do it. So I'm about to give in and just do it this way. But that's the one like stickly thing that I'm like, no, I don't want to start out and then change it later. I want to do it now. But the logic is there. So other than that, I've absolutely no reason to. Nothing he's ever said has ever made me think, oh, here's a guy left over from the tax protest movement that's selling some false thing. And he said he had all the answers. So and if anybody knows me and the journey I've been on, you know that I call out people. I don't trust people. I don't. So for me to trust this guy, it's a big deal. So my other stipulation is that I would never ask anybody to do something that I wouldn't do myself, which is what gurus do. What these guys do, they're like, fill out this paperwork and go do this. And then they sit there and they watch. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Is it going to work? Oh, no, it didn't work. He's in jail. Next person. Hey, here's my paperwork. Go file it and do this. Oh, didn't work. Didn't work. He went to jail. So, I'm going through the process myself, going the whole thing, which if you want to do it, he can explain it to you much better than I can. And, the other aspect of it was, I told him what I wanted to do, and he was 100% not only behind it, but wanting to be a part of it. And that is, I want to open a PMA for all the people out there who have not put their children in the birth certificate system, so that everybody can join a single private organization, and in that organization, in that association, we can have a forum, a library, everything that it takes to learn. And the great thing is, it's so much easier to handle a child that's not a U.S. citizen. You don't have to jump through all these hoops and here's this. It's a golden opportunity. People are contacting me all the time saying, "What can I do with my, what do I do now? I didn't register my child." And the answer is, well, the child can choose for himself anytime.
Right.
To be a citizen. If he wants to go register himself and be under Caesar, that's great. That's what go to the district. What does district mean? It means distress, distraint, and seizure.
Wow.
Okay, that's the definition of District of Columbia, right? Distress, distraint, and seizure. Another word for Caesar. That's why they call it a cesarean section, right? So you're seizing the baby. So they can do that anytime they want to. But in the meantime, we can go through this process with the child and give the child a way to interact with the world without putting them into slavery, without putting them into bondage and surety, right? And at the same time, hopefully, I have like I said, I have a guy who started a homeschool PMA.
Hmm.
And I thought that was brilliant. He got all the people together that were homeschooling in his area, and he formed a private association, and now they have a public private school. So all the kids that are homeschooled come together like an old schoolhouse to get privately educated. I think that's brilliant, and I think that would be wonderful to establish different things like that because my whole theory is that that's the only way we're going to ever pull ourselves out of this, is to stop registering our children to be slaves, to be voluntary servants, to be public minded, to go to public school and be publicly educated, publicly and trained. I think it's disgusting. And when people contact me and say I'm the reason that they didn't put their child, in the birth certificate, and I feel a sense of moral and spiritual responsibility, not only for the child, but for I said, look, it's going to be sacrifice. You're going to actually have to be a parent. You're not going to be able to send your kid to a public babysitting for 8 hours a day. You're going to actually have to teach them yourself. You're actually going to have to be a true father or mother. So I would like to be able to provide people a way of remedying the problems that everybody's going to come up against when those children start aging, and hopefully this will also solve the notion that homeschool children, they're not socialized. Like, so you like socialism, do you? So you can socialize amongst private people and actually learn and be private together, because I think the one thing that Brandon taught me that I would never even have considered is that the word privacy and the word alone are not in the same ballpark. Okay, you're not doing this to be alone. You're doing this to be together. You're doing this to be a people. You're doing this to be an association, a private people.
Yeah.
You cannot be private alone. There's no point. There's no one to trade with. There's nothing to do with. You have to have someone else there with you, and I've said that all along. So, if you don't trust my instincts, that's fine. I'm going through the process now, and I'll let you know in a year. Was Brandon worth the price? Right? So yeah, I mean, I that's all I can say. I mean, yeah.
That's a great answer, and it's funny because our mutual friend, he told me quite a bit about your work, your research, and when we met up, because guys, we've had conversations for probably over, if you add it all together, it's probably over 20 hours. I mean, amazing topics we've covered, and the more I got to know Clint, it's like really, it just solidified my position as well. It's like, it's so funny because I always call bullshit on these sovereign gurus and their strategies, and that's why I never talk about those things. I just focus on business and trust and PMAs. That's just managing risk, right? And so for him to come in with these brilliant ideas, because we're gonna be working on other stuff too that's gonna blow your guys' mind if you guys ever come privy to it. But his idea is something I've been doing since I was 20 years old, right? To me, instinctively, even before I knew all the stuff I know now, I just naturally acted in the private. I shouldn't even say that on camera, but let's just say I haven't contracted into certain things. Even at a young age, I knew it just wasn't right. I didn't know why at the time, but I had that instinct. And so I just acted on that. And later in my life, I came to found that in my studies, tens of thousands of hours, that it just confirmed everything that really I was brought up in. I was brought up in a private setting, God-fearing family, which I'm very thankful for this day. Um, at the time when I was young, when I was 18, I, I thought it was bad because I wasn't, really of the world, right? Because I was in a private school. I was surrounded, by a church and church friends, stuff like that. But when I was 18 and out of the house, I thought that was all bad. But then the older I get, the more I appreciate it, because it comes back to like not only what I do for work now, but like just spiritually. So really that's kind of how I came to these conclusions. So okay, so more stuff in the chat. So okay, this is for Clint. I really appreciate your perspective and insights. I feel like I recognize your voice, but I can't pin where I've heard you speak before. I'm guessing Crow 777.
Yes. Like I said, I've done, I mean, since 2010 or so, I mean, just been doing radio constantly. So
Wow.
over 1,000 shows. I did a stint on RBN for full time for a while, and bunch of documentaries, and I have Red Pill Sunday School on YouTube, BitChute, and what's the other one? Odyssey is the one I actually use.
Nice.
And then yeah, I just been around. That's all. I've been around. It's been too long, for God's sake.
Yeah.
I put out my first documentary. It was called The Corporation Nation, and I just did it, uh, just because it needed to be done, and put it out there, and then started doing radio after that. That was what got me any kind of notoriety in the first place. And so I went through the system, and I went through the movement. I call it the movement that never moves. And went through all the groups, the We Are Changes, and I listened to Alex Jones for years, and
Same.
way back when, and started calling fraud on him, and just it's amazing how many people I don't trust in the alternative memes. One of the things that I gotta say, it's I think it's really important, because everybody's turned to Fox News. If I see the Trump and Fox News, I'm like,
Tucker
Jesus.
Carlson, yeah.
Yeah, well, they, when I first started at RBN, I went down there to meet with John, who recently died. Good man.
John Murdoch?
John Stadmiller is his name.
Oh, okay.
He was actually partners with Alex Jones, and they broke up, and then he started his own network.
Huh.
So yeah, he doesn't like Jones either. But he said there's a real problem happening, and you're going to see it in the future. And he's basically that Fox News had already started Patriot Radio back. This was 2013. Patriot Radio was already there. Hannity and all these.
Oh, God.
I mean, Fox News was just the worst of the worst. And then all of a sudden, it's not the news anymore. And he said basically, Fox News is positioning itself to take over the alternative movement. He said they're going to start. You're going to see it. You're going to see. They're already starting to do it. They're already starting to advertise the same way we do: gold and silver, restorable food. Right? Everything about Fox News has become what the alternative movement was when I was doing a full-time stint in it. 500 and something shows I did. So his warning was so precise, and every bit of it came true. I mean, Fox News now doesn't even call itself the media anymore. It refers to the media as a separate entity than itself, right? Pretty freaking amazing, if you ask me. And he was dead on about how people would be tricked into, going over to Fox News for their alternative news. I'm just like, you guys, you gotta be nuts to fall for that, right? But that, I don't know if that saved me from it, or if I would have known that, from the start. But man, did it come true? Did it ever come true? It's It's freaking scary. How many people get their news from Fox News?
Yeah. So Manny says, so there's no way to pull my kids out of the birth certificate system. And Clint, it looks like you already answered it. It's not about pulling out the kids and avoiding. It's about using the PMA trust and LOC system that I use. So yeah, that's a great answer to that, Clint. Yeah, there's no way you can undo the birth certificate. I know there's dozens of strategies out there that claim that you can, but
Yeah, to be clear, there's a Texas website that I found that has what is the purpose of the birth certificate, and it's the government website, and it says the purpose of the birth certificate is to establish domicile in the United States and
Yeah.
mere residence in the state. Right now, if you're born naturally, you're born in the state, that's where your domicile is, and you'd be resident in the United States, residence being secondary to domicile. Domicile is where your law comes from. So what they've done is
Right.
they've stolen you from out of the natural notion of being natural born as the people of the state, and they've put you into this district with its jurisdiction that spreads to all public places and made you a public entity, public person, right? So your domicile, your law comes from the United States because and this is the part that matters to the question, your parents filled out an application. That application was called a certificate of live birth. From the application, the person was created, and that's where the birth certificate came from as a receipt for you basically abandoning your child to the state or abandoning your parental. You never declared your parental rights. You gave them away, and you were given back this child to basically raise under the. The state basically says the marriage is a three-party contract between the man, the woman, and the state. State is the highest law when it comes to the child. So because child is a legal term, legal person. So essentially, you got to think about what that means. If I file an application to apply for something, it means whatever that thing is, it's not mine. I can't change it. I can't alter it. I can't do anything to it once it is created from the application. The person belongs to the United States. Okay, the citizenship, the vessel, right, belongs to the United States, just like the pieces on the Monopoly board belong to the Monopoly board. If I want to play the game of Monopoly in the United States, I have to operate in some sort of person, right? Some sort of entity, some sort of status is what that means.
Yeah.
So, no, you cannot get rid of, change, alter, etc. The only exception to that, which I find fascinating, is like if there was a guy who didn't pay his child support, he disappeared off the map, and came back like 8 or 9 years later, and his wife had declared him dead because she wanted to collect the Social Security to pay for all the alimony and child support he never paid, and that's what happened. So when he came back to try to enter back into society, the court said, well, I'm sorry, you're dead. You have no person. You're not a citizen of the United States. And he begged and he pleaded. Begged and begged and begged that court to let him have his person back, his status. And that was one of the first, between that and myself going through identity theft, that was the way I really understood that person is not me in any way, shape, or form. How can my identity be stolen? Well, then it's not me because it's detached from me, right? So, yeah, the guy, I mean, he begs. This was in the Huffington Post, and it happened in other countries, too. And I'm like, that's amazing that you can be declared dead. And the court apologized for the fact that you're dead to the court, but you're dead. You have no person. So it is possible to be alive and have a death certificate.
That's a service you guys should set up.
Well, I got to tell you, it's something I've always thought of. There must be a way to do it, right? Because it's all you're doing is life. Life is defined as the life of a contract. Okay, that's one of the definitions of life. It's like the 25th down if you go define life. The life of a contract, the time period a contract exists from life to death. Death, there's all kinds of different definitions for death. There's spiritual death, which is what citizenship is. right? Because you're not under God anymore. There's all kinds of death. Well, death is also the end of a contract. That's what a death certificate is. It means the contract is done. A contract must be ended in the way it was begun. The death certificate ends the birth certificate, the life certificate, right? There must be a way to get a death certificate, because it doesn't mean that you've died. It means that the contract is over.
Yeah.
How do I do that? Can I do that considering I'm a prisoner of war? Can I do that considering my parents filled it out, not me? There's all kinds of considerations. So I've always thought that is, and maybe someday I'll find the answer. Maybe someday I'll grow a pair of balls and go into the recorder of deeds and ask him, because that's where the birth certificates are held, is the office of deeds.
Hmm.
What the hell does that mean, Brandon?
Well, maybe we can get that guy a few drinks and see what he divulges after that.
Right, I'll be like one of those secret interviews. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's great.
yeah. We,
So
we
I
can
guess
be the legit Project Veritas, not the control opposition. Oh my gosh. But yeah, that's fascinating though. That's in the office of deeds.
I was like, wait a minute, deeds?
Wow.
Huh.
Nothing surprises me anymore, honestly.
I know. It's weird.
Yeah. But that's a good question though. But yeah, like I always say, we're not trying to use escapism. We're blending in, using the system I implement. And I'm not reinventing the wheel, guys. I mean, I learned this from people I've been doing it longer than I've been alive. So,
And like I said, man, reading some of these documents about trusts, academia.education or Yale or all these different libraries, you just search for a trust or anything, and you're like, my God, these things are unstoppable.
yeah,
Like they're like, people are like scared of them. I mean, it's like the system is actually afraid of, they can't do anything against it.
right.
So
That's
I don't
why
know.
that's why you got families like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, and the names we'll probably never know. They're hiding behind trust. Like the Georgia
Exactly.
Guidestones. No one knows who's controlling that because the land and everything's being managed by a trust. So we don't know who's really behind. Well, I guess the Georgia Guidestones, they've been exploded, but
Oh,
uh,
were they?
well, I shouldn't say exploded. I think what happened? Somebody bombed
they
it or
set off a
something.
bomb.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, it happened. I believe 6 months ago.
Nice.
It's on video.
Yeah,
Really?
it's fascinating, and
No one got hurt, I hope.
some people say it was a bomb. Some people say it was literally an act of God. Who knows, man? Who knows? Either way, I think that's still an act of God, even if it was somebody putting a bomb there.
You are an act of God. Everybody's an act of God.
That's true. That's true, man.
That's the whole point.
Yeah. Well, guys, Clint, where can people find your work?
If you type in the exact address, because otherwise you won't find it.
Yeah.
If you type in realityblogger.wordpress.com, that's my whole blog for 10 years. Reality Blogger has 1G. .wordpress.com. My book, which you can download free, is strawmanstory.info. YouTube and BitChute and Odyssey. Odyssey is actually my main channel because the other ones are YouTube has banned 4 of my videos, my documentaries. And that is Red Pill Sunday School channel. And Red Pill Sunday School is the name of my show. I did a whole season, and I'm on season 2. So, and it's really not a show. It's more just me talking and going over a history that you'd never heard before.
Yeah.
Pretty informative. In fact, I'll probably have to go back and listen. So this PMA that I'm going to open, because basically I'm like, well, what can I do? I can't operate in the public because I'm on every list. I'm on the ADL list. I'm on the freaking whatever list. You know, they're gonna ban me and shadow ban me and all that stuff. Whatever I do, so I decided I'm gonna open a PMA, a private website. Why am I messing around in the public where they can ban me? You wanna get my stuff? You wanna get all my new stuff? Pay a PMA fee and come join me in my PMA.
Yeah.
And I'll start that soon. And as a benefit for members, I have a friend who is who is reading that book right there. She's reading that into voiceover, so we're gonna release an hour a week or so for the next 150 weeks or something like that. I don't know how long it's going to be, but it's going to be very long. That's essentially a dictionary. So
It is. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So, and then I'm going to be making some more movies, and I'll have all my work on a thumb drive that you can get, and then I'm going to keep saying I'm going to do some music. Got the equipment, just got to get the nerve to do it. And yeah, so, and that's going to be my own private little world. I'm not going to worry about the public anymore, you know, just operate in the private. And if people want to come follow me, great. If they don't, great. But it's also going to be my little journey here, you know, with the stuff that I'm doing with Brandon. So I have a feeling that we're going to find a lot of success. Like I said, it's the first time I've had hope and more than hope, like confidence, even
Good.
in you know, things we're talking about doing and partnering in, and so I'm excited. And I think that we'll be able to help a lot of people along the way. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really, really excited in those endeavors. It's kind of funny because it's stuff I've always wanted to do, and so what a great joint venture that's going to be there. But yeah, guys. So if there's any other questions, I'll get to those before we end this. But just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody. So anyone else has a question, feel free to put it out there or not. One more chance. Yeah, I think
dinner time.
people's minds are just blown probably from you know, everything that you've covered. So, all right, guys. Well, that was a lot of fun. Oh wait, Manny has something. You got something there, Manny?
No, I'm just applauding.
Oh, that's an applause. Okay, I gotta get my readers on.
Oh, that's funny. A little hand.
Hey guys, we mentioned you know, I look pretty young. I actually look younger than I did at 21, and I'm 27 right now. I did a lot of stuff to my diet and health protocols, let's say. I hate to say I reversed age, but like if you look at pictures from when I was 20 or 21, I look a lot more youthful than I did then. So a lot of people, when they see my videos, are like, "Oh, this guy's like 18. Who's this guy?" But you know, whenever people ask me, "How old are you?" I'm like, "How high is your IQ?" Because usually when they ask me that question, it's in a condescending way. So I'm only going to answer it that way if, you know, they're trying to be smart with me. But
I didn't ask.
You did it. You
Did
never
I?
asked, actually. Yeah, which is
No.
funny. Yeah.
No, because you know it's a moot point once you start talking to him. A cocky little bastard.
I guess I am, but hey, man, I am firm in my position. And what if I told you I was 18? Like, what would you have said? Like, would have changed your mind anything? Or
Well, I mean, you're old enough to be a bar attorney. I mean,
that's true.
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so
That's funny.
no, I mean, like I said, all the information's been spot on, which doesn't happen that often with me. So
Yeah.
All right, I am gonna go eat. So
Oh yeah, it's
good
dinner
times,
time.
man.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining everyone. That was a lot of fun, and have a good night, y'all.
Touch out.
Good night.
All right, see you guys.